Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide. A reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that a limerick is a short, funny poem with a special rhyming pattern that has been around since the 1700s? Learn that limericks have shorter lines with only 5 to 7 syllables and were meant to be playful and silly. Discover that William Shakespeare and Rudyard Kipling enjoyed writing limericks, and you can too. Here is one. There once was a student named Claire who tripped on a loose classroom chair. She laughed at the fall, said, "I'm fine after all," and brushed off the dust in her hair.
It's actually kind of funny when you think about it. You can spend like 3 excruciating hours studying a critical financial report, highlighting every margin, trying so hard to focus.
Oh, absolutely. And by lunch, it's completely gone.
Exactly. The numbers just vanish from your mind. But then you have this ridiculous 5-line poem about a man from Peru that you heard back in the 3rd grade.
Right, and that is just locked in there.
It's in the vault forever. You could recite it right now. So welcome to the deep dive. Today we are exploring a really bizarre intersection of ideas for you. We're looking at nonsense poetry, grim Victorian survival stories, and highly advanced cognitive memory hacks.
It's a phenomenal contrast, really, because we often assume that learning and retaining complex information requires this serious, heavy, grueling mental effort.
Yeah, like it has to be hard work to be valuable.
Exactly. But when you look at the mechanics of human memory, the things that seem incredibly lighthearted, like limericks, for example, they actually offer a profound window into how our brains process rhythm and syntax and, just data storage in general.
And the timing for this conversation could not be better for you listening, because today, May 12th, is officially National Limerick Day.
It is.
Which gives us the perfect excuse to put pen to paper, conjure up some ridiculous characters, and really figure out how this simple, bouncy poetic structure evolved. I mean, it started out as this silly 18th century folk joke from the county of Limerick in Ireland, and it became a highly efficient data storage system for the human mind.
Yeah, and to really understand that evolution, we have to look at the person who essentially codified the form. Because we naturally associate limericks with carefree fun, right?
Right. They're just inherently bouncy.
They have this whimsical outlook on life. But the explosive popularity of the limerick actually stems from a decidedly dark, kind of chaotic place.
Oh, yeah.
We have to look at the life of its greatest champion, Edward Lear.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because Lear was actually born on this exact day, May 12th, back in 1812. And his early life is it's almost like a Victorian superhero origin story. But his superpower was drawing birds.
That's a great way to put it.
Because it's the total antithesis of a whimsical poem. When Lear was just 13 years old, his father, who was a stockbroker, experienced a total financial collapse. And he was sent to debtor's prison.
Which, in the Victorian era was a catastrophic event for a family.
Catastrophic. I mean, think about being 13. Your biggest worry should be, navigating awkward social circles or passing a math test.
Right, just normal teenager stuff.
But suddenly, your family's financial stability just implodes. Your father is locked away in a literal dungeon for unpaid debts.
Right.
And the safety net is it's gone.
Completely gone.
So, as a direct result, young Edward Lear was forced to earn a living to provide for himself. By age 15, he was a working artist. It wasn't some cute hobby. It was a pure survival mechanism.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, what is critical here is what he was drawing. He didn't just, casually sketch landscapes at first. He developed this incredibly meticulous skill for drawing birds. And to draw an ornithologically accurate bird, you need absolute precision.
Right. Yeah, you really do.
You need boundaries. You need these strict rules of proportion and anatomy.
I love that you brought up the need for rules there.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like he was building a life raft out of structure.
Huh.
Like he used the strict lines and boundaries in his bird drawings to create a sense of control in a childhood that had completely spiraled out of his control.
That is a perfect way to conceptualize it. He forced order onto a chaotic world through his art. And, that meticulousness really paid off.
It did.
He gained significant recognition for these highly detailed bird illustrations, which eventually led to a job with the London Zoological Society.
And that job was the absolute turning point for him. Because being in that scientific zoological circle ultimately earned him an invitation to live with the Earl of Derby. And that estate is where literature as we know it changes forever.
It really is. It was while living with the Earl of Derby, specifically entertaining the Earl's grandchildren, that Lear composed the poems that would become his famous 1846 work, A Book of Nonsense.
And he went on to write more than 212 limericks. He essentially took this somewhat obscure, loose rhyming structure from those old folk songs, and he just locked it into place, creating the modern limerick.
He really did.
But what blows my mind about Lear is the psychological contrast of it all. Because he had this whole other life as a very serious landscape painter, too.
Oh, absolutely.
He was traveling through Europe and Asia. He published the illustrated travels of a landscape painter, featuring these majestic, sweeping collections from places like Albania.
He was a survivor of childhood poverty, a master scientific illustrator, a world-traveling painter, and yet, when he passed away on January 29th, 1888, at the age of 76, his legacy wasn't the majestic Albanian mountains.
No.
It was nonsense.
Right. Of all those massive life achievements, he is remembered for these humorous little 5-line poems. Why do you think that is?
Well, because his poems are not just random silliness, they actually rely on a very strict, almost mathematical formula.
Okay.
He took that exact same need for precision and boundaries that he used in his bird illustrations, and he applied it to language.
Okay, I have to push back a little here. Calling a silly poem about a guy with birds in his beard mathematical feels like a bit of a stretch. I mean, isn't it just rhyming?
It is far more than just rhyming. It's an architectural blueprint for cognitive tension and release. The mechanics underneath that bounce are incredibly rigid.
How so?
First, you have the rhyme scheme, which is exactly AABA. Lines 1, 2, and 5 must rhyme with each other, and then lines 3 and 4 must rhyme with each other.
Okay, let me read one of Lear's most famous ones just to test this math. Let's see.
Go for it.
There was an old man with a beard who said, "It is just as I feared. 2 hours and a hen, 4 larks and a wren have all built their nests in my beard."
Okay, so notice the rhythm there. Lines 1, 2, and 5 not only rhyme beard, feared, beard, but they share the exact same meter. They establish a baseline pace. But the real magic, the sort of psychological trick of the limerick, happens in the middle, lines 3 and 4.
Right, the 2 owls and a hen, 4 larks and a wren. It feels remarkably faster when you say it out loud.
It is faster. What's fascinating here is that the rules state these middle lines must have only 5 to 7 syllables, so they cut the established rhythm in half.
Oh, wow.
And when you shorten the lines, you accelerate the pace of the poem. It creates this compressed, hurried setup. As a listener, your brain feels that acceleration as building tension.
Yeah,
You feel like you're falling forward, and that tension perfectly delivers the punchline when that final returning line 5 catches you.
So you establish the premise, you rapidly complicate it in the middle to build anxiety, and then you hit the inevitable rhyming resolution.
Exactly. It isn't just a poem, it's a mechanism for delivering a dopamine hit of resolution.
That makes total sense. Here's another classic Lear. There was an old man of Peru who watched his wife making a stew, but once by mistake, in a stove, she did bake, that unfortunate man of Peru.
Notice how line 4, in a stove, she did bake. It rushes you right into the absurd conclusion. It demands resolution.
And there's the one about the young lady whose nose continually prospers and grows. When it grew out of sight, she exclaimed in a fright, "Oh, farewell to the end of my nose."
The imagery is so vivid.
It is. And what's fascinating is that literary giants across history completely recognize the sheer power of this cognitive formula. We aren't just talking about children's authors here.
No, not at all.
William Shakespeare, Alfred Lloyd Tennyson, H.G. Wells, T.S. Eliot, James Joyce, Lewis Carroll, they all loved and wrote limericks.
When you have the authors of The Wasteland and Ulysses drawn to the exact same 5-line structure, it really proves there is a fundamental cognitive appeal to that AABBA rhythm. Our brains just crave it.
Yeah, listen to this one by Rudyard Kipling. There was a small boy of Quebec who was buried in snow to his neck. When they said, "Are you frizz?" he replied, "Yes, I is. But we don't call this cold in Quebec."
Flawless pacing. The structural constraints actually forced the writer to be incredibly efficient with their narrative.
Which brings us to the poem that completely bridged the gap for me. The moment I realized this isn't just a joke format, it is a literal zip file for the brain.
Yes, the Shakespeare summary.
It's a limerick by Brainerd McKee that summarizes the entire plot of William Shakespeare's play, The Tempest. Ready?
Let's hear it.
There once was a girl named Miranda who flirted with one Ferdinand, a shipwrecked young prince, who, after a wince, played chess with her on the veranda.
I mean, that is staggering efficiency.
You've got the main characters, the inciting incident of the shipwreck, and the famous chess playing resolution, all compressed into 5 lines. It proves that rhyming is a highly efficient data storage system.
And this is where we transition from poetic history into modern cognitive utility. Because the exact same predictability that makes a limerick funny, that anticipation of the rhyming punchline, is what makes mnemonic rhymes an incredible tool for human learning.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Break that down for me. Why does the brain prefer a rhyme over a standard sentence when trying to learn facts?
It comes down to cognitive load. The brain is essentially an energy-saving organ. It wants to do as little work as possible.
Right.
So when you read a standard paragraph of dense text, your brain has to expend a massive amount of energy just parsing the grammar, figuring out the syntax, and determining where the sentence is going.
It's like it's actively building the road while trying to drive on it.
Precisely. But with a rhyme, the structure is predictable. The brain knows exactly what rhythm is coming next. And because it doesn't have to waste energy predicting the grammar, it can dedicate all of its computational resources to retaining the actual data wrapped inside the rhyme. The structure lowers the barrier to entry.
Which brings us to the most fascinating practical application we are covering today. Using mnemonic rhyming to memorize massive, complex lists. In this case, the 10 Commandments.
Yes.
Now, I have to be honest, when I first looked at the source material for this memory exercise, I thought, okay, some of these rhymes require bizarre mental gymnastics.
Oh, they definitely do.
But the more I dug into it, I realized that this active visualization is exactly why the technique works so well for the learner.
You are hitting on a core principle of neuroscience there. We don't remember the mundane. If I tell you to picture a brown dog, you will forget it in 5 minutes because your brain categorizes it as normal, non-threatening, and unimportant.
Makes sense.
But if I tell you to picture a neon green dog wearing a tuxedo, your hippocampus flags that bizarre, vivid imagery as novel, and it encodes it into your long-term memory.
So the weirder the connection, the stronger the glue. All right, let's walk through this factual memory exercise. It divides the 10 Commandments into 2 chunks. Love for God, which covers Commandments 1 through 4, and love for neighbor, which covers 5 through 10.
Let's start with Category 1, Commandment 1. The rhyme is one none, meaning thou shalt have no other gods before me. None.
Okay, that one is a straight shot, super easy. But then we hit Commandment 2. The rhyme is to mu. The commandment is, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image.
Right.
So the mnemonic asks you to think of a golden calf, hence mu, reminding you to only worship God. Now, if you're listening to this right now, you're probably rolling your eyes thinking mu to golden calf is a massive stretch.
It sounds totally absurd, but that absurdity is the lock. You are taking a highly abstract theological concept, graven images, and linking it to a silly auditory trigger, moo, which forces your brain to visualize a shiny golden cow.
Right.
You've bridged the auditory, visual, and conceptual pathways. I guarantee you will never forget to moo.
Okay, I feel the neural pathways connecting. Let's do Commandment 3. The rhyme is 3 tree. The commandment is about not taking the Lord's name in vain. The connection. Trees have leaves with veins. Don't take the name of God in vain.
This is a brilliant use of a homophone. V-A-I-N versus V-E-I-N. Again, reverence is an abstract concept, but a leaf with visible veins is a highly physical, textured object. The rhyme bridges the abstract to the physical.
And then Commandment 4 brings in kinesthetic memory, actual physical movement. The rhyme is four-door. The commandment is, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. The mnemonic uses that classic childhood finger play. Here is the church. Here is the steeple. Open the door, see all the people. The visual is that when the doors are open, the church is full of people keeping the Sabbath holy.
And when you add physical hand movements to a rhythmic rhyme like that, you are engaging entirely different motor cortex regions of the brain, creating multiple backup systems for the memory.
That's incredible. Okay, moving to the second category. Societal rules, loving thy neighbor. Commandment 5. The rhyme is 5 hive. The commandment is to honor thy father and mother. The visualization is that a home is like a busy beehive with a father and a queen bee mother.
You're mapping a complex human familial structure onto a simple, easily visualizable phenomenon in nature.
Commandment 6 is pretty blunt and visceral. 6 sticks. The commandment is thou shalt not kill. The rhyme reminds you, don't use sticks or any other weapon to take a life.
Notice how primitive that imagery is, too. A stick is the most basic human weapon. It anchors a heavy moral law to a simple physical object you can feel in your hand.
Commandment 7, 7 heaven. This one is about not committing adultery. The memory hook is that marriage can be heavenly when exact vows are kept.
It relies on a cultural rhyme we've heard countless times, smoothing out the cognitive friction.
Then Commandment 8 deals with theft. 8 gate, thou shalt not steal. The visual cue is keeping your gate locked so no one can steal your belongings.
A literal boundary representing a moral boundary.
Commandment 9, 9 lion. The commandment is, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. And bearing false witness essentially means lying to incriminate someone. 9 lion.
It's a purely phonetic trick, just dropping the G in lying to force the match with 9.
And finally, Commandment 10, 10 hen. The commandment is, thou shalt not covet, wanting something that belongs to someone else. The visual is, don't covet your neighbor's hen. Be content with your own hen. Which is, it's undeniably comedic, just staring over a fence, intensely jealous of someone else's chicken.
But that comedy is why it works. Edward Lear knew this when he was drawing birds and writing about old men with beards. Comedy lowers the brain's defenses. It makes the information approachable.
So let's pull all these threads together for you listening. We started with a 13-year-old boy whose father was thrown in a dungeon, surviving his chaotic reality by drawing hyper-realistic, strictly bounded birds.
Yeah.
He translated that need for structure into the rigid, tension-building AABBA math of nonsense poetry. And we've just seen how applying that kind of predictable structure, using weird leaps like two moo and 10 hen, can permanently lock complex historical codes into our neurology.
The overarching lesson here is that structure is the universal language of the human mind. Whether you are a Victorian artist trying to make sense of a collapsing family, or a modern professional trying to memorize a presentation for work, wrapping information in a predictable rhythm dramatically changes how your brain processes reality.
Rhythmic language isn't just a party trick for National Limerick Day. It is a genuine cognitive shortcut to being well-informed. It makes the impossible task of remembering the flood of data just a little bit easier.
And, if we look at where the world is heading right now, this desire for predictive structure takes on a really fascinating new dimension.
Oh, how so?
Well, think about modern artificial intelligence. Large language models, like the ones writing code or generating essays today, operate entirely on token prediction. They don't think the way we do. They calculate the highest probability of what the next word should be based on massive structural patterns.
Wait, really? So AI is essentially playing a massive game of fill-in-the-blank rhyming?
In a sense, yes. AI algorithms rely on the exact same predictable rhythmic structures to generate coherent text that our brains rely on to memorize text. It suggests that whether you are dealing with an organic human brain shaped by evolution or an artificial neural network built on silicon, intelligence itself fundamentally craves and relies on predictable mathematical structures to function.
Wow. That is an incredible thought to leave on. Our brains and the supercomputers we are building are both just desperately looking for the next rhyme. I love that.
It really reframes how you look at a simple poem.
It does. So here is your challenge for the day. Since it is National Limerick Day, grab a pen, figure out your own AABA rhythm, and write a 5-line limerick. Maybe summarize a movie, a work project, or just something absurd about your pet.
And more importantly, the next time you are struggling to remember a complex list, process, or a presentation for work, well, instead of staring blankly at your notes, ask yourself, could you turn it into an ABBA rhyme? What is the 10 hen mnemonic for your own daily life?
Yeah, find your own weird green dog in a tuxedo and share your limericks with your family and friends today. Because as we've learned, sometimes the things that stick in our heads forever aren't the serious, heavy concepts. Sometimes the absolute strongest, most resilient architecture in our mind is built entirely on nonsense.
Thank you for joining us for this day in his story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in his story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.